And so considering my bench press is still a world record, I do believe that it would still lift more than the current guys who are lifting right now. Because if it wasn't, wouldn't they have broken the record? I'm asking. Coach Greg, in today's video, how strong was prime Greg Doucette lifting legends? And so apparently I'm a lifting legend. And so Bat Guy, he compiled a video going through my strength from when I started up to when I retired. And so at first I was thinking he was talking about Prime energy drinks or Optimus Prime from the Transformers. But lo and behold, it was Coach Greg. And so of course, many of the comments said, Coach Greg is going to be reacting to this. You know I am. And so I've already watched the video and I can tell you that it's about half right and about half wrong. And so I'm going to fill in the blanks and explain everything.
Coach Greg, Dr. Greg, Gregory, Gregonator, even the parrot from Aladdin.
He sounds like that parrot from Aladdin.
Cool. Drama queen, the parrot from Aladdin, Greg Musette, Greg goddamn Doucette, Gregory, Greg Doucette. Call me what you want, but you're watching my videos. And so if you wanted to know about my past, including failing a drug test and so on, this the video for you.
As many of you know, Greg started training at just 10 years old, alongside his father and twin brother, who for the record, looks nothing like him.
And so my twin brother has blonde hair and he's a professor of chemistry at Dalhousie University. My brother is editor Steve and he's in fact bald. Myself and Steve were cycling racers who also happen to lift weights. And my twin Alan Doucette, he's a black belt in karate. He likes running and so on, but not so much lifting the weights.
But after Greg's father injured his arm, Greg would continue to train on his own until he was around 15.
And so notice I hit puberty earlier than last time. I'm 13 years of age here and I'm weighing in the 120s. My twin brother under 90 pounds. And so if you compare the arm width of myself to my twin, you can see I clearly have better genetics for building muscle. My twin, Alan Doucette, even smarter than Coach Greg. You thought it was impossible that anyone could have more intellect than myself, but it's actually true. He is in fact a genius. He's smarter than last time, professor at Dalhousie University. And what you didn't know is that he's also very strong. He did bench press a little bit back in the day. He weighed 132 pounds. He could bench press 295. His goal was to hit 300, but he never achieved it. Now, had he have stuck to lifting, training, and so on, I'm certain he could have hit his goal, but he didn't like it all that much.
Greg wasn't following just any routine, however. The information about training was scarce and often misguided. Think classic-style bro splits with insanely high volumes per workout.
And so when I first started lifting weights, training's really heavy. I was doing sets of 6. Did not have a clue what I was doing. But what I did know was that I was very strong. I started going to the local bench press contest when I was 15 years of age and I was beating the adult men. People are saying, how are you so strong? I didn't look all that big, but for the size that I had, I was incredibly strong. And so he's saying there wasn't a lot of information back then. We barely even had the internet. And so when I was doing a bench press contest, a guy walked up to me and says, you know what you should do? You should try powerlifting. I'm like, what's powerlifting? Is that where you lift the weight over your head like you see in the Olympics? He's like, no, it's a squat and a bench and a deadlift. I'm like, I've never done a deadlift before, but it seems like a lot of fun. And so I decided to register for a meet. I called up the organizer, the meet director, and I said, hey, what's the world record in the bench press? Because I plan on breaking it. He's like, you've never competed in a competition before. You don't even know what powerlifting is. And you think you're going to break the world record in the bench press? Yep. And so I learn about the various weight classes, and he says there's one, it's 67.5 kilograms. I'm weighing around 160 pounds, and so I say, hey, I'll cut 12 pounds of water. And so I'm a lobster fisherman at the time, and I say, hey, I'll just not eat for the entire day, working on a lobster boat, and then I'll go to the local YMCA with a snowsuit on, and I'll do a bunch of cardio. And so I do this, I get under my weight class, but I can't now drive home. I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, I had to get a friend to drive me home. And so the next day, my dad, he drives myself and my brother to the powerlifting competition. And I discover that you have to wear something called a singlet, like a wrestling suit. I don't know what these things are. And so I borrow it from a lady who's competing in the competition. They disallow my lifting belt because there's a pad on it. And they say there's all these rules. You have to pause the weight on the chest. And I said, hey, I want to lift raw. So I proceed to remove my shirt. Remember, I was trying to break the raw bench press world record. And to my knowledge, raw meant without a shirt. And so I'm trying to break the shirtless record. They're saying, this is not what it means. No shirt means no bench press shirt. I'm like, what is a bench press shirt? And so they explained to me that a shirt helps you lift more weight, of which I have no clue about. All I know is that I can bench press a lot. And so I'm 22 years of age, not 23 as is stated, and I proceed to break the Canadian record for juniors, seniors, and the world record in the bench press for juniors. Now, the world record for juniors doesn't officially count because it was a meet that allows a bench press shirt. And so despite the fact that I didn't use one, there's no proof of that. Remember, this is back in the 90s. And so my record, the world record for junior bench press in my very first competition, it's unofficial. But my junior and senior national records, they do in fact count. Now, I do in fact have to go and get a drug test done, and I have to pay for it out of pocket. And so for 14 consecutive powerlifting meets, I had to pay for every single drug test that I did. Why? Because I kept breaking records. Every time I entered a powerlifting meet, my goal was to break the national record. And so I kept breaking records in the 67.5 class, that's 148 pounds, 165 class, 75 kg, 82.5 kg, 181 pounds, 198 pounds, 90 kg, as well as the 220, 100 kilogram records. And so I had national records in every weight class varying from 67.5 up to 100 kilograms. And oftentimes I would set records in multiple weight classes in a single day. At the Canadian Nationals at one meet, I set the record for the 82.5, weighing in 179 pounds, of which I then re-weighted later in the day over 198 pounds. I drank that much water to go up 2 weight classes. I do believe I'm the only person in history to set 2 national records up 2 weight classes in one single day. And so I know many people are going to say, yeah, but you were on steroids the entire time. You, after all, did fail one drug test. Yes, I failed a drug test at a powerlifting meet in 2009. I had been on an 8-week cycle for the Canadian National Bodybuilding Championships in 2009. I made a video talking about this. I showed my before and after. And I then failed at the powerlifting competition, which took place about 4 months later. I had stopped taking those steroids. I ended up failing the drug test for metabolites. That means it was in your system at one point for boldenone. That's known as EQ, equipoise. And so what happened is I was given fake steroids that I thought were, for example, test propionate, but it actually had been EQ. And so because of that, I failed the drug test. I admit it. I did it. It's wrong. It's bad. I was an idiot. I was a moron. But at that powerlifting meet, the one where I failed the drug test, I actually got disqualified for not lifting any weight. I was so weak after coming off that cycle from doing the bodybuilding competition. Remember, I didn't have a PC. I didn't know what I was doing. I just took an 8-week cycle for that bodybuilding competition. And so I tried to bench press 501 pounds with a bench press shirt, I might add, which helps you lift approximately 100 pounds. I tried to lift 500 pounds 3 times and failed. And so once I failed the drug test, I said, well, I'm going to blast harder than last time. Going on steroids, I'm going to start trying to break national records. At my next powerlifting meet, I competed in non-tested powerlifting. You're allowed to take whatever steroids that you want. And I bench pressed over 500 pounds, this time raw. No shirt whatsoever. My bench press went up 100 pounds in 3 months doing a cycle. And for years to come after this, I broke multiple national and world records and in fact had the greatest powerlifting bench press of all time for people in the 40 plus division in my weight class. 90 kilograms, I bench pressed 529 pounds with a pause, and that was after a devastating injury. That was my last bench press competition ever. I injured my shoulder, had cortisone shot. I couldn't train. It was horrendous. I barely got through the meet, but I still had enough strength left over to set that world record. 529 pounds. I was planning to bench press 550. But because of the injury, I couldn't recover. And so to this day, I no longer bench press.
And it definitely paid off. At just 18 years old, Greg was competing in his first ever bodybuilding show.
And so at 18 years old, I did my first bodybuilding competition. This was 4 years before I started powerlifting. Now, the photos he's showing are me in my 20s, and so I don't want you to think that I had this kind of physique when I was only 18. I certainly had a winning physique, but it wasn't a physique to this level.
Which was also around the time he started focusing seriously on powerlifting.
And so I never focused seriously on powerlifting until I was 22 when I found out what powerlifting was. At 18, I didn't even know it was a sport. Didn't even know it existed. Hadn't done a deadlift. The first time I did a deadlift was training for the powerlifting meet a month before the competition. And in case you're wondering, at my very first competition, I weighed 148 pounds. I squatted 275, of which I was shocked at how low you had to squat. I'd never squatted that low in my life. I had been squatting 385 pounds for reps in the past, but I would only go halfway down. And so I was shocked to see you had to break parallel. Very difficult, especially when you're dehydrated. Bench press, I did 341.7 pounds. Believe that's what it was, 155 kilograms, and in the deadlift, 355 pounds. I never even won the competition. I broke the world record for the bench press, but never even won powerlifting because you add up the squat, bench press, and the deadlift. And so I discovered I suck at squats and I suck at deadlifts, but I hadn't really trained specifically for them. And so years later, I continued to train for powerlifting, but I never got all that good in the squat. My best squat for one rep, only 600 pounds. I suffer from FAI syndrome, femoral acetabular impingement, CAM type. And so you can look it up if you want, but what it means is I had severe pain whenever I tried to train. And so I rarely was able to train for the squat. Anytime I tried to squat below parallel, the pain was too much. And so for me, partial squats, partial leg presses, and so on, a lot better for my own body. And so after surgery, I took 6 months off of training that way. But again, I re-injured the hip and I had to stop. And so unfortunately for me, my genetics would not allow me to be an elite level squatter, which would dramatically hold me back in the 3-lift total. However, the deadlift, where you don't have to go all the way down, and the bench press, these were my 2 best lifts.
And in 1999, Greg would enter his first powerlifting competition at the CPU Men's Open in Charlottetown. And he pretty much shocked the audience.
So the black and white photo there, I'm about 21 years of age, and the lightweight champ doing this, I actually weigh 149 pounds there. The photo makes me look way bigger than I am. That was at the drug-tested Canadian National Bodybuilding Championships. I'm 149 pounds, and I showed people a photo of me at 175, and most people thought I looked better here. And so let me tell you, the lighting, the camera angles, and so on can make you look far better than you are. In this photo, I'm thinking, wow, look at the physique. But I was 149 pounds. I'm 5'6". I know I'm a manlet, but for being 5'6", 149, it's not really all that big.
He performed remarkably well for a first-timer, squatting 363 pounds and deadlifting 452 pounds at just 23 years old.
And so remember, my first competition, I was actually 22, and so this would have been my third competition. And so when Bad Guy did the research for the video, they don't have all the competitions I've ever listed online. Remember, this is back in the 90s. The internet had barely been invented. And so unfortunately, and no fault of his own, he didn't get all the information correct.
But his most impressive lift by far was his bench press. Greg benched an astounding 342 pounds, more than twice his body weight.
And so 342 pounds, that is when I was at my first competition weighing 148. It's still impressive at 164, but much more impressive, and in fact, the world record at the time for juniors at 148. And so if you're trying to increase your bench press, you're trying to train harder than last time, and you're trying to stay natural, you're doing what Coach Greg preaches. Don't make the same mistakes as I do. Use Turk Builder. I guarantee you're going to get stronger. You're going to notice the difference. You're going to feel it. How many products do that? You really think you're going to notice and feel creatine? This is far greater, far stronger than creatine. Now, if you're a teenager, you're too young to use this. Don't use Turk Builder if you're a teenager. You have so many newbie gains left to get. Save it for when you hit a plateau. Use the product, break through the plateau, and if you don't believe me, you get your money back. I mean, seriously. I mean, what products offer those kind of promises? And so you can say all you like, oh, the studies don't do this, studies don't do that. You haven't read all the studies. And if you were to give 100,000 people creatine and say, hey, did you notice? Did you see it work after a month? Half of them are going to say, I didn't really feel, I don't notice the creatine. Turk Builder is far stronger, far better than even creatine. But remember, it does come with negative side effects. Many people, they have a harder time getting sleep. They don't need as many hours of sleep. And some people get more anxiety. And so please be careful. Interested? Code Greg 15% off. Click the link in the description.
But despite his promising start, Greg would take a 7-year hiatus from powerlifting.
And so I never ever took a 7-year hiatus from powerlifting nor bodybuilding. I competed perhaps 25 times or more in those 7 years. I've in fact competed more in powerlifting than I have in bodybuilding. 70 powerlifting competitions. I was a school teacher at the time and coaching kids, traveling to various powerlifting meets in various competitions in different provinces. And so we perhaps competed 3 to 5 times every single year. I was competing more often than last time, and so there was no hiatus. I was actually setting records in every single weight class. Depending if I was on a diet for bodybuilding, I would compete in a lower weight class, or if I was in my off season, I would compete in a higher weight class, always setting national records, always getting drug tested, and always passing those tests.
Although he may have competed locally undocumented, choosing to focus on his bodybuilding career and chasing his dream of becoming an IFBB pro.
And so I had no actual dream of being an IFBB pro because I was competing and training 100% natural. It wasn't until 2009 that I said, you know what? I can't get any better right now. I may as well go on steroids and go for my pro card. And so when I was training in the 1990s, I was perhaps 25 years of age or younger. Had no thoughts of chasing a pro card. There was no classic physique back then, no 212, only open class bodybuilding. I was competing in the 140s, 150s, 160s, and eventually the 170s while being natural. But as an IFBB pro, I had to put on way more muscle. And that I did once I began using steroids. And if you look at the difference that happened in 2009, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Greg never stopped lifting heavy though, and when he returned to powerlifting in 2005, it was clear that he definitely hadn't lost any strength.
And so I've been competing many times, setting several national records. Now, several of these meets where I set records, there was no national judge. A national judge had to be present for a record to count. They had to ensure that all the rules and standards and that the quality of the refereeing was in order. And so oftentimes I would set a record and it wouldn't count officially. You had to pass and pay for your own drug test for those records to count, of which I'd done 14 times consecutively.
Competing in the single-ply world championships under the IPF, which is a drug-tested federation, a 600-pound squat, over 500 pounds in the bench press, and a deadlift in the high 600s.
And in that competition, you were wearing a single-ply powerlifting suit, and so those numbers were a little bit higher than if you were competing, for example, raw. And so those numbers were me weighing 179 pounds, 2 weeks out from bodybuilding in a drug-tested bodybuilding competition. I was very lean, very dehydrated, and wearing suits, which help you lift a lot more weight. And so I got a bronze medal at the IPF World Powerlifting Champions, and later a gold medal at the Pan American Games.
In November 2009, at the Eastern Canadian Championships held by the CPU, Greg competed in the bench press only category. And at 33 years old, weighing around 195, Greg benched an impressive 529 pounds.
And so in that competition, I did the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and in the bench press, I bombed out. In other words, failed the lift. And so they still drug tested me because they always drug tested me. They randomly select the people that they most likely think are on steroids. And considering I was setting national records at practically every competition I did, I was still tested, despite the fact that I got last place. And I believe later in that meet, I did the bench press contest again, wearing a different type of a bench press shirt. There was a new bench press shirt on the market that helped you lift even more weight, various shirts. This is probably going over people's heads, but I perhaps was able to bench press in the bench only division. Now remember, you do squat, bench, and deadlift, of which I bombed out in the bench. I couldn't even get the 500 pounds. And then I believe I re-entered the meet later in the afternoon and did the bench only. And if you want to know my greatest bench press with a shirt, I actually bench pressed 562 pounds, weighing, I believe, 181 a few years prior. That was with a special lifting shirt, and I did it at the Canadian Nationals. This was more of a local meet, a meet you do for fun, of which I'd done about 4 months after that bodybuilding competition. Remember, I'd been on a diet, I wasn't feeling strong, I had used steroids for 8 weeks for that bodybuilding competition and simply had stopped. And so I did the test, failed for boldenone, as well as I believe a test to epitest ratio of 4-to-1, something that was off. But regardless of this, I obviously shouldn't have been competing, and it was a mistake, an error. And so if you want to say that I used steroids for every single one of my powerlifting competitions, and that's why I looked that way, then by all means, you can think that. I'm telling you that I wasn't. When I did those other 14 drug tests, I wasn't cheating the system. And so clearly I've made mistakes in the past. And so if you want to unfollow me right now, then by all means, you have every right to hate me for it. You don't have to like me. I'm not asking you to. I continue to put out content, and I'm just trying to be honest.
However, post-competition, he was randomly selected for a drug test, and he failed due to elevated levels of testosterone.
And so by random, he means targeted, as in they specifically wanted to test me because they always tested me. Every time I went to a powerlifting meet, I was expected to be tested, because I was at the elite level. And so it wasn't for elevated levels of testosterone, it was for boldenone metabolites. To have elevated levels of testosterone, I would have had to be taking testosterone. But what had happened was, for the bodybuilding competition, I must have been taking something that had EQ, which would have caused me to have metabolites of boldenone for several months or even a year following the competition.
And around the same time, he also competed in a local bike race in an amateur category, during which he got drug tested again, and he was later banned from competitive cycling for 8 years.
And so about the same time the bike race, it was actually 7 years later. And so I'm just trying to get things right. There's no hate here. I'm just wanting people to know the facts. I'm not hiding anything. There's no reason for me to lie. 7 years later, I entered a local bike race for fun. I was in the C category. There's A, B, C, and D. I had been training for about 3 months. I was having fun. I showed up and I didn't know I'd be drug tested. I looked on the entry form. It didn't say anything about being drug tested. They showed up to the drug test because I showed on my Instagram wall that I was on HRT, at the time 120 milligrams a week. And they said, oh, that's that guy. We don't like him. We're going to drug test him. And so they showed up to a bike race of which they'd never drug tested anyone in cycling history ever in 40 perhaps years. And they decided to test me. A guy was racing in what was essentially the novice plus division. And so a guy showed up and said, hey, you muscle man, I'm going to drug test you over there in the woods. He didn't have a badge. He didn't have anything. And so I refused the test. I had witnesses and I testified of this in court. He then signed the sheets and signed his name as the witness. His name was the tester and him as the witness. He didn't have a witness. He didn't have anything. And so when I went to court and said what happened, the judge said, well, this is ridiculous. You can't sign yourself as a witness. But unfortunately, I said to the judge, I was on HRT. I admit it. I'm not lying. I told everyone. And so they said, hey, well, unfortunately, you're still guilty because you're saying you're on HRT. I didn't know that they had drug testing in the competition. They argued, yeah, but you had a race license, and on the race license, it says subject to drug testing. I said, you sent me the race license 2 days after the race. I believe on purpose. 2 days after I enter the competition, they send me the race license. There was no signature to me on the race license. And so I feel they targeted me because of my Instagram post and said, we're going to prove a point. Of which they did. They didn't want the 204-pound novice racer Coach Greg entering a local bike race for fun. How dare you? And so did you know what I also was taking? I was also taking weed edibles. Weed edibles you're not allowed to do. And so remember, if you show up to the local volleyball tournament or pickup hockey, perhaps you play some golf, and you've ever done weed edibles, you too could be banned for 8 years. And so that's literally what happened in cycling, but I continue to compete in cycling, but I do it on Zwift. You've all seen me racing harder than last time, promoting people doing cardio, and I don't feel like a horrible person for doing bike races while on HRT prescribed by my doctor.
Now, Greg remains adamant that he trained for over 20 years naturally, only turning to PEDs later in life.
And so I know the truth. You can believe me or you don't have to believe me. You can believe I use steroids and or SARMs or peptides at 18, at 20, at 22, at 25, at 27, at 28, at 20. You can choose the year that you want, but I didn't do it. Whatever I say, you're going to to make up your minds regardless, and so believe what you want.
And eventually world records with a 529-pound bench in the 198-pound division at 41 years of age.
And so as far as I know, that world record at 41 years of age in the 90 kilogram and under division still stands to this day. I don't know of anyone in any category that has beaten my record. And so is it still the world record? Well, I don't know. Are there other guys under 198 pounds in that weight class lifting more than this? Maybe. I don't know.
For context, his best bench of 529 pounds would still rank amongst the top level lifters in his weight class and is in fact still a world record in the Submasters and Masters category in the IPA Federation.
And so considering my bench press is still a world record, I do believe that it would still lift more than the current guys who are lifting right now. Because if it wasn't, wouldn't they have broken the record? I'm asking.
And let's not forget that he also holds the Guinness World Record for the most weight deadlifted in 1 minute, being around 20,000 pounds with a sumo setup, which even the world's strongest man Mitchell Hooper could not replicate.
And so I do believe that if Mitchell trained properly, he could in fact set this record. Now, I may not be all that strong for 1 rep, but what I'm really good at is lifting something very fast, very hard for about a minute. And so what I did was 403 pounds in the deadlift. They weighed the bar out to make it official. It wasn't quite 405 pounds. It was 403.4 pounds, give or take. And I did 50 reps in 50 seconds. The timing was a bit off. I thought it was ending at 50 seconds, not 60, whatever. It's still a Guinness World Record. And so when I'm racing on a bike on Zwift, you can guess what I'm very good at. If we got about 1 minute left to go and I'm there and I'm fresh, I'm probably winning the bike race.
He also claimed to have benched 405 for 15 reps and a 685-pound deadlift for 5 reps.
And so my best lift on the deadlift is 765 for 2 reps. I've done 7 plates or 675 pounds for 10. I've done 585, that's 6 plates on each side for 26 reps. And on the bench press, 405 for 15. I've done 450 paused for 7 reps, and 5 plates, 495 pounds for 4 reps paused on the bench press. But perhaps more impressive is the 3 plates for 33 reps, 315 pounds, or the 2 plates on each side for 54 reps. Also won the pound for pound World's Strongest Man competition at the Mr. Olympia, where I bench pressed my body weight 210 pounds for 60 reps. Those numbers are insane. I don't think I've heard of someone below 200 pounds bench pressing 500. Look at the form, wide grip and huge arch with short arms, very little range of motion. That was my favorite comment. You only bench press a lot because you have short little T-Rex arms. And so there's something known as a wingspan. It's how wide are you from one tip of your fingers to the other. And so my height is 66 inches tall. My wingspan is 67. And so my arms are actually slightly longer than average. Slightly longer. Now, consider this. If the reason I can bench press so much is because I have short little T-Rex arms, why do I have the Guinness World Record of the deadlift? When you deadlift, the longer your arms, the better. And so if I have short little T-Rex arms, how am I also a deadlift record holder? You really think about that. And so when I do the deadlift, people say you're only strong in the deadlift because you have long arms and such a short range of motion. And then when I do the bench press, they say you have short arms and short range of motion. You gotta pick one. I mean, I'll give you one. I might have short arms helping me bench press or long arms helping me deadlift. But I can't have both short and long arms at the same time. Greg is living proof that being short has some advantages. I'll trade every one of those advantages for being tall. This video title makes it sound like Greg used to be part of the Transformers. That's what I was thinking. Optimus Prime! After seeing Greg in his prime, I am harder than last time. Hey, yo! It's a little sus. Wait till he finds out I oiled up before GTA 6. Bro, comment getting more zesty than last time. And so, there you have it, my rendition of my strength, lifting, bodybuilding, and so on. Let me know what you think. I would continue to powerlift, however, I have more injuries than last time. I can't bench press without pain anymore. I began lifting at 10. I accomplished everything I could ever have wanted to do, setting the world record all time for the Masters at the age of 41. And so looking back, I always thought I would have continued to be a powerlifter, but perhaps the injury was a blessing in disguise. Had it not been for that injury, I most likely would have continued to blast steroids. I would have perhaps been chasing the 50 plus world records, 60 plus, and so on. And so considering I was injured, I said, I need to stop this. I need to do a different sport. I took up bike racing, something that, well, it has in fact cost me some injuries, broken many bones and so on doing bike racing. But one thing it's allowed me to stop doing is abusing performance enhancing drugs. And I know many of you are going to say I'm a hypocrite. I hear it all the time because I used steroids and abused them for 10 years. But imagine the harm that that did to my body. Imagine the years it may have taken off of my life. And so when I say don't abuse steroids, I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm doing it because I reflect back on the mistakes that I've made and I wish I hadn't have done them. I'm certain if I hadn't abused steroids, I would still be bench pressing to this day, setting national drug tested world records. I'm certain my body would be healthier, my heart and organs and so on. And so please don't make the same mistakes that I have. And so I welcome the hate. Of course, you can hate me all of that you want, but what I'm trying to do is to make a difference. I'm trying to deter the use of performance-enhancing drugs, especially in the teenagers and those who are very young. Remember, before the age of 25, your brain has not even finished developing. You don't know the damages that you're going to be doing. And so I get it. There's so much pressure to use steroids. I remember those pressures. I was able to stay natural, competing in 42 bodybuilding competitions while being 100% natural. But eventually I did succumb to using steroids later in my career. Now, if you're looking to stay 100% natural and increase the gains, I'm telling you, Turk Builder is no joke. If I express just how good this is in a video, I would get so much hate. And so I don't dare express how good it actually is. And so if you don't believe me, why are you even watching this video? If you think I'm lying about Turk Builder or GO2 Max, why are you even watching my channel? I'm not lying, I'm not bullshitting you, I'm telling you the honest truth. But if you still don't believe me, if you're still worried, you can use it at no risk to you. It's a money back guarantee. Get to the website, code Greg 15% off, subscribe, click the bell button, comment to boost the algorithm. Please like the video if you in fact liked it. Watch one of those two bloops. And of course, the cookbooks, the training books, the Circle Diet book. Get all the books as well as my Harder Than Last Time clothing line on the website. Now, if you don't have any money, you don't need money to get to my website. There's a 50-page free diet and training program. It's free, and there's several of them. It's not just one carbon copy plan. It's a plan based on your specific needs for your own calorie requirements. And so don't tell me I haven't done anything for you. And so please get to the website right now. Also, join the 300,000 plus newsletter subscribers. And until next time, I am out.